train whistle had not sounded in Coyote Flats for 6 years, but lies still arrived on time. They came on wagons, on the backs of men with dust-cracked lips, in the careful pauses between sentences. By the time Mara Calder stepped down from the stagecoach with her one small trunk and the bruises she did not explain, the town already knew what it intended to know about her. She stood a moment in the street, the sun a white coin above her, the boardwalk warped and splintered like old bones. Someone laughed. Someone spat. A boy whispered a word he had learned from his father, and then pretended it was a joke. The lie took its first breath. She said nothing. She had learned that silence could be a shield if you held it the right way. Jonah Pike watched from the shadow of the feed store, his hat pulled low, his hands still. He had not spoken much since the war, and the habit had stuck like a burr. People mistook it for agreement. He had learned that sometimes saying nothing kept you alive, and sometimes it killed the right thing quietly. He did not yet know which it would be today. Mara asked for a room at the boarding house. Mrs. Hargreave looked her up and down and smiled, like a woman counting spoons. "We don't take trouble," she said. Mara nodded as if trouble were a package she could set down. She paid 2 weeks in advance. The room was small and clean, and the window faced the livery. At night she would listen to horses, breathe and tell herself that breathing was still possible. The first lie was simple. Someone said she had come from Red Knoll after the fire. Someone said she had been the last seen with Eli Morrow, the banker's son, the night he vanished. Someone said she had been paid to say otherwise. The lies braided together and hardened, and by the second day the braid had a name. Liar. Mara took work mending shirts and scrubbing floors. She kept her eyes down and her words measured. She did not tell anyone that Eli Morrow had come to her, with a ledger and fear shaking his hands, that he had begged her to keep it safe, that he had said the town would rather burn than read what it contained. She did not tell anyone that she had watched him ride out at dawn, pale as a ghost, promising to return by nightfall. He had not returned. The ledger had. Jonah saw her in the mercantile, counting pennies with care, and felt the old itch behind his ribs. He had known Eli, known his smile and his weakness for cards. He had also known men like the banker, who wore respectability like a clean shirt and hid the stains in the wash water. Jonah said nothing. He bought nails. He watched. The sheriff came calling on the third day. He was polite, which meant he had already decided. He asked where she had been. She answered. He asked again. She answered the same. He left with his hat in his hands and a promise to return. That night a stone broke her window. It did not carry a note. It did not need one. Jonah heard the glass. He was awake most nights anyway. He went to the boarding house and stood under the window until the lantern in her room stopped shaking. He did not knock. He did not speak. He went home and sharpened his knife until dawn. By the end of the week the town had improved the lie. Now she had set the fire herself. Now she had lured Eli away. Now she had laughed when she did it. People preferred villains who smiled. Mara took the ledger from beneath the floorboard, where she had hidden it, and ran her fingers along the spine, names, numbers, promises broken into columns, the banker's careful hand, the quiet theft of water rights, the bought votes, the bodies counted as costs. She could give it to the sheriff and be called a liar again, this time officially. She could leave town and let the truth rot, or she could wait for a man who had not said a word to her and hope that silence could still be a bridge. The rancher came to her door at dusk, hat in hand. He did not ask to come in. He said, "I can keep a horse fed. I can keep a secret. I can't keep you safe if you stand alone." His voice was rough from disuse. It was the most he had said to anyone in months. She studied his face, the lines cut by wind and time. She saw no hunger there, no calculation. She nodded. "Tomorrow," she said, "at first light." They rode out before the town woke, the ledger wrapped in oilcloth against her chest. Jonah did not ask where they were going. He knew. The hills north held the old telegraph station, burned but still standing, where a man could send a message if he knew how to coax life from a dead wire. Jonah had learned in the war. They were halfway there when riders crested the ridge. The banker's men, 3 of them, carrying the confidence of being right because they had always been right before. The lead man smiled and asked for the girl. Jonah said nothing. He turned his horse and rode. Bullets followed, tearing air. One took Jonah in the shoulder. He did not fall. They reached the station as smoke rose behind them. Jonah locked the door and went to the wire. His hands shook. He steadied them. He tapped out names and numbers and locations, the truth spilling into the line like blood into sand. Mara held the door with a borrowed gun and a borrowed courage. The men broke in as the last message went out. There was shouting and the crack of wood and the smell of powder. Jonah went down with a second shot. Mara fired until the gun clicked empty. She stood over him and waited for the end. It did not come. Instead, the sheriff's men arrived, drawn by the message relayed onward, by a system older than any one town's lie. The banker's men fled. The truth had legs now. Jonah lived. He lost the use of his left arm. He did not complain. The banker was arrested, then found dead in his cell with a note blaming the girl. The town nodded, relieved. The lie tried to live again. Mara stood in the street and spoke. She read from copies of the ledger that had already flats. She read names. She read amounts. She read dates. She read until her voice broke, and then she kept reading. People shouted liar. People cried. People left. Jonah stood behind her and said nothing. When it was over, he took her hand. It was the first time anyone in town had seen him touch another human being since the war. The cost came quietly. The ranch burned. The well was poisoned. The cattle scattered. Jonah watched his life turn to smoke and did not look away. He had chosen this. He had chosen her. The truth always sent a bill. They left town at dawn, not chased, not welcomed. The road was long and the world was wide. Mara carried no ledger now. Jonah carried the silence that had finally learned its purpose. Years later, when the train whistle returned and the lies found fewer mouths to rest in, someone would remember a woman who had been called a liar and a rancher, who had said nothing until the truth cost him everything. And someone else would say that sometimes that is the only way a town learns to breathe.